Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Metaphysical Egypt.
Let's get started. Today we're going to talk about it's basically all about the spin. And we've talked about this before, and I can't encourage people enough. If you feel like you're lost in these presentations and you haven't seen the other episodes, it really, we set this up in a way that we can present the information and somehow, start off with some basics and then just grow the knowledge. I do repeat a lot of what I say throughout because everything's connected. And that is really the foundation of the story of, our creation. It's a fractal pattern, a breath of life. There's no beginning, and every end is a new beginning. So it's just, everything is cyclical, and you'll see that the presentations have that cyclical feeling about it. So yes, we've talked about the spin before, but we're building up to present some even more incredible information. So let's get started. I found this wonderful picture, which is you see the fish and they're climbing, basically, they're rising through 7 fields of energy, right, to reach the center, the heart, and the winged heart disk, if you will. I think it's just a beautiful energy because we are basically navigating the currents, and that's what fish do. So I don't know who created the image, but it's fabulous. And this from Madame Blavatsky. She just has an incredible amount of esoteric information from, worlds upon worlds of different, fields of ancient knowledge. But we have ourselves spinning back to source. And what she says is the whole essence of truth cannot be transmitted from mouth to ear, nor can any pen describe it, not even that of the recording angel, unless man finds the answer in the sanctuary of his own heart, in the innermost depths of his divine intuitions. Mm. And I think this is powerful on many levels, but it also tells us that, everything I'm talking about, whether it's about what's happening within us, and especially what's happening without, in this illusion that we're experiencing, the game board, it's happening within. It's all happening within. It's all from the center and the heart that breathes out. So as we go through all these different things, and we're going to get into some really fascinating topics as we move forward, always remember this is a journey of perception from center, and not necessarily a real, it's an illusion, right? It's a journey of perception. And here we have the matrix, right? We talked about the matrix. We had a whole segment called the matrix. And centered heart is the engine that drives the electromagnetic torus field. This field sustains the spin of all the chakras. It's the field, this torus field, we've talked about it a lot. The electromagnetic field on its many interconnected levels is life. That's what it is. It is the breath of life. Understand the patterns of this, and you'll understand life and life force itself. And again, this is important to remember as we move forward. I brought up this wonderful image of the Caesarean cylinder, the symbolism, and it's with Dagon, right? And Dagon, we hear many different versions of the name for Draco, but we're talking about Draco, or here, the fish god. And Draco, of course, we've talked about Bess being related to the ecliptic center, basically, within the curves of Draco itself. This Draco symbolism is powerful and incredibly ancient, pre-dynastic. Very, very ancient, that, it's like civilizations all over the world picked up this knowing of the importance of what's happening in the northern circumpolar stars. And you can see that the image is showing us things we've talked about. There is this sun disk with an eye, right? And that's the center. We're looking at the center. So it's always about this dynamic. And you see the world tree, or the tree of life, erect. Again, the Jed pillar is raised underneath this ecliptic center, the eye nebula. But yes, I get back to it's all about the spin. So from that moment, we spin into our perception of reality. And I'm using this image of the swastikas that also show you that it's the image of Ursa Minor and Ursa Major, the Big and Little Dippers, and they're spinning basically our reality into being, right? That goes back to when we talked about the whole idea of the weaver and knife, and she spins the net. So again, this is an ancient knowing. It's expressed different ways worldwide, but it's basically always the same dynamic of knowing that this is how we spin into a perception of reality. Ursa Major was a potent symbol of rejuvenation dating back to pre-dynastic times. And again, I've spoken about this breath in and out and the pause. And after the pause, we spin. That's rejuvenation back into a perception of our basically game board. And, you know, when you come to Egypt or Turkey, you have the opportunity to visit the Tenora dancers, or Sufi dancers, as they're called. And what's amazing about them, if you're familiar with them, is their dance tells the story of creation, and it's spinning the world again into creation. It's all about navigating these currents. And of course, the Ark of the Covenant, which we've talked about to a great extent, and we're not done yet, is the electrical arc, which happens when waves can agree or make a covenant and spin. Check the symmetry of cell division or a good Sufi dance for the electrical formula. It's always the same. And something a lot of you may not realize is chariots, when presented symbolically in the ancient world, most often represent this Big Dipper and the spin. And I love this. This is Sybil in the top center. She's the Greek goddess of nature and fertility. It's always about fertility. And notice her chariot is being pulled by the lions. Lions, again, represent electromagnetic life force energy. So in a way, you know, this life force energy, again, spinning our world into being. At the bottom, I have a picture of a Vimana, somebody's artistic conception. And I had never realized there's so much talk about the Vimanas being spaceships and, you know, details about it. And remember, writings, writings happening at different time periods can take something that means something else, and it's a metaphor. So again, we're a culture that wants to take everything at face value. But if we're looking at ancient symbolism, they're really giving us symbolic idioms and symbols and iconography to describe the forces of nature. And so when I was in India, my first trip, I was with a wonderful woman who we were walking around Kailash Temple, the amazing rock-cut basalt temple cut out of the mountain, the cliff. And we were looking at an image of this basically, it was a Vimana, and it was this chariot, similar to what we're looking at now. And she said, you know, people don't realize that's the Big Dipper. And, you know, it made perfect sense to me. Now, of course, there's a lot of people that would argue with me on that. But I think originally we're talking about these same concepts that we see everywhere in the ancient world. And again, I've shown you this slide, you know, the seat of power in motion. It's all about this moving energy. Nothing in a breath of life, in a living perception of reality, is stagnant except, you know, as I said, the living perception, until we have that pause and begin all over again. The power of God in earth, you know, on earth in motion. And I love pulled by the lions, because this is a powerful symbol. Again, feline energy, iron, life force energy. This is a wonderful image of Sybil again as the mistress of the wild nature, currency, symbolized by her constant companion, the lion. She's a healer and goddess of fertility, you know, not unlike Tefnut and Sekhmet and the lionesses in Egypt. In some parts of the world, as I said, the 7 stars of the Big Dipper are thought to be a type of wagon. And we see this portrayed symbolically as a wagon. And in Ireland, it was called King David's chariot, from one of that island's early kings. And in France, it was called the Great Chariot. the Big Dipper, right? I'm not making it up. So yeah, and here we have on the left, in Afghanistan in 300 BC, we have Nike driving a chariot drawn by lions and accompanied by the Greek goddess Sibyl. What I found interesting, you see your images for the sun and the moon, and then there's the star that we see so often. And then at the end, you're looking at someone standing. They say this is a priest with incense, but I find it fascinating. If you look closely, it almost looks like there is a bird on its head. And I have many thoughts about this, but since I don't know for sure, I'm not going to mention it. But it's really interesting that you have that standing figure that they're riding towards, spinning maybe back into center. And here we have the Scandinavian Freya, and she's being pulled by two cats, feline energy, right? And it's we're looking at them, creating on Earth, as above, so below. This is, it's basically, again, weaving the world into being. This is the matrix. This is the electromagnetic field. And the grid lines on the Earth. There's just this energetic connection between all of this electromagnetic energy that creates, our perception again of reality. I'll repeat myself over and over again. And again, on the far left, we have Inanna, Ishtar. She's many different names. Always often flanked, or in the one picture, you see her standing on the lions that are facing two different directions. And here we see her riding the lions that are pulling the chariot. Again, the Big Dipper. Really fascinating. And I love that this looks like a priest figure is pouring water, the life force energy. And what's coming out of the mouth of the lion, right? There's a connection between these waters, the waters of heaven and the waters of earth, that we do talk about a lot. And Ha'api, who represents Aquarius, speaks to these two energies. So Inanna must descend, and this is really fascinating again. Inanna must descend. The story, the mythology of Inanna is she has to descend into the underworld and remove one royal garment, right, at each of the 7 gates until she gets to the rock bottom, kind of where we're at now, and she stands naked, and then, horrifying moments, right? She begins to ascend back through each of the 7 gates, reclaiming her powers as she goes through each one. And again, that's that same breath of life. We descend, consciousness devolves, and then it evolves back to its center, or source, if you will. But Inanna is never the same. She has been transformed. Her descent was an initiation into the mysteries of life and death, the form and the formless worlds. We come here on purpose. It's not a punishment. It's a choice, in my opinion. Ishtar riding the lion, or the line of fertility, and I'm showing this to, again, keep speaking about these lines, energetic earth lines, that represent powerful places on earth to basically build structures, to harness the energy, to plant. You want to be in places that have this powerful energy to enhance, again, life force energy, but to enhance body, mind, and spirit. Ezekiel's wheels and the chariots of fire. And here you can see in the Babylonian symbolism, the Big Dipper is basically a bigger wagon and a lesser wagon. And Ezekiel is actually being pulled, and we have these 4, when we've discussed this often, the 4 fixed signs of the zodiac that represent those game-changing moments in, our cycling up and down through our perception of reality. We'll go into much more detail as we move along. And I bring this into play. I find it fascinating. There's been a lot of talk, especially recently, with Robert Schoch and another gentleman, Manu. I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name, but He's been doing a lot of work, Robert S. Nyland. But they're speaking about this symbolism of the lion in Egypt. And as you know, Hakim said that the Sphinx was Tefnut. And what they're pointing out is there's an ancient symbolism of a lioness basically called Mehet. And her basically her paradigm is very similar to Tefnut. You know, it's just changing through, again, cycles. The names change, but the concepts and what they represent stays the same. And what I find fascinating, first of all, if you look at her in this picture in the bottom center, you actually see her, and there's something coming out of her back, and I'll show you some better pictures. But to me, it looks like a key for turning, for spinning, because of course, all waveform, you know, nothing is linear. Everything spins and turns, you know, it's the sine wave that spins. And above her, I find an interesting object that I believe, to me, looks on a symbolic level like a Big Dipper of sorts, possibly, and that's just literally guesswork. I'm not saying it is or it isn't, but it's quite interesting. So the wooden panel from the tomb of Hessi Ray, and they used to have this right as you walked into the museum in Cairo. It was right to the left. They had these panels. I was always drawn to these images because, to me, there is something powerful about them. It's showing two Mehet titles framed in white, and to the right, Heka Mehet. And if you remember, Heka is magic. Mm-hmm. And the image of Heka, he's basically crossing the two serpents to create the portal, right? And the portal, the vortex, is a spin. It uses the vulture sign. And I'm not sure, again, omitted after HK. I'm not sure what he means here. Compared to the same title on Wepanefret's stela, spelled a little bit differently. And at the bottom center, she is called Master Babu, I would say Mistress Babu, Opener Mehet. So Opener Mehet, you know, it's an opener, you know, the opener of the path in a way. And you can relate that to Anubis, again, the path opener, someone who opens, you know, opens that moment for the spin to occur. We see Anubis at the center of the Dendera zodiac, riding the mirror, coming out from center and creating the vortex or electromagnetic field.
Is that the opening of the mouth tool circled in red?
Well, that is the Big Dipper, and that's why I point that out. Mm-hmm. So I'm not saying, oh yes, it is. We know that the opening of the mouth tool is the Big Dipper. But these are things that they haven't been talking about. So, and I don't want to say, if I can't cite it or research or read about it, I'm not sure that symbol is the opening of the mouth symbol. But, you know, hey, if it is, it's, to me, it looks like maybe a more ancient version of the symbol. Mm-hmm. But again, I just wanted to bring out this relationship. People have asked me, you know, well, Robert Schoch says, you know, the Sphinx is Mehet. Well, I agree with him. There's a lot of documentation to support that. But I also believe Mehet is another version of Tefnut.
Right. For a different age.
Yeah, representing the same dynamic, but different words to describe. And again, I've pointed this out with everything we've talked about up until now, that the names change over time, but the dynamics always stay the same, and they only change to show differences in cycles of perception. So it's an interesting, you know, dilemma and challenge for people researching, is to remember that these things are happening. And you know, the further you go back, you know, you find more truth. And then as we devolve, we start to find the twisting and turning and manipulation of symbolism. So here's another image, and you can see the key, and you can see that that figure that could be an opening of the mouth. You know, it's hard to say what that actually is. And I really want to do more research into that. I just wanted to introduce it here. But it does look to me that the red vertical part above the lion looks like something that would turn, you know, like a key. Just my gut intuition, my feeling, to represent spinning. And underneath that, again, to support what I'm saying, is you see the symbol for sachet.
Mhm.
And sachet is the grand architect that basically is responsible for all of the patterns that generate from that initial spin into form. So it seems to relate to me if you look at the whole name here symbolically. So Mehit was also associated with the practice of Heka magic, as evident in the title sequences of Nefer-Seshem Ra and Hesi Ra and Wepanefret. One of us has translated the combination of rod and lioness as opener of Mehit. The last known use of Mehit symbol, including the bend rod above her, dates to the time of Mary, a royal master scribe who served during the reign of Khafre over a century before the reign of Unas. The lioness and rod were used in a two-title sequence written in tandem, each beginning with the sign for master, the carpenter's axe, representing the hieroglyphic word mash. So, master to me could mean the master architect, right? That again, that grand architect who spins the world into being.
Mhm.
And I'm just introducing thoughts. I'm all about opening minds to new ways of looking at things. So here I've included this image of Sachet and this whole idea. She is responsible for physical manifestation. Thoth, her consort, is responsible for written and oral language, the beginning or the dawning, when we fall into a place where we no longer feel each other and we require written and oral forms of language to communicate. And again, it was believed that Jehuti, Thoth, scribed the history of man's perception of time and space, and Sachet placed it into the energy grids of the earth for us to experience through eternal cycles of conscious awareness. As astrologers, they trace the sacred geometry of the movements of the sun, moon, and stars, Big Dipper, in the heavens above that was being experienced in the mirror on the earth below. And I've shown images of Sachet stretching the cord at temples all over Egypt. There's a wonderful description at Edfu that speaks to the beginning of time, right? And she is using the Big Dipper in order to align this basically the beginning of the patterning of life on Earth, right?
Mm.
So, and then at every other temple, they do this stretching of the cord ceremony, and she's symbolically represented, and they align the temples, right? The physical embodiments of life to the Big Dipper in some fashion. They utilize the Big Dipper to create their alignments. So again, there's this powerful, relationship with Mehit and what I was just talking about. Again, I'm bringing this back to the Sphinx as, being at the place on the Giza Plateau at the moment, Zeptepi, of the first breath of life, of the creation of our physical perception of reality. I bring these are images of ancient kern stones, and they're stone tools for hand grinding a wide variety of materials. They're used in pairs, and the lower stationary stone of the early example is called a saddle kern, while the upper mobile stone is called a muller. And the upper stone is moved in a back and forth motion across the saddle stern. And this is very similar to when we talked about the churning of butter in the oceans, basically the primordial waters of creation. And when and this is in Hindu or Vedic mythology, when they're churning the butter, they're also going in a back and forth motion. It doesn't go in a circle.
Mm-hmm.
It's always going back and forth. And I'm going to bring this up several times because these are the thoughts we need to get in our head somehow or keep in mind as we're looking at some of the concepts I'm going to bring forward, because these patterns of energy are reflected fractally in everything, all our cycles and cycles within cycles. So here is, again, that image of the churning of the milk. And you have the demons on one side, and you have the I can't, what are they called? Help me.
Divas?
Divas, thank you. So you have the feminine and the masculine. Well, in the divas, they're obviously you're thinking in our terms, our perception, we'd say the good and the bad, but it's really the negative and the positive. It's back and forth, and this is basically the electromagnetic dynamic. This is how it works. It's always a breath in and out, or back and forth, coming back to center and then out into separation consciousness. So here is a picture of the opening of the mouth tool, and it's agreed upon that it is a perception of the Big Dipper opening the mouth for that first breath. It's an animating principle, and they used this magic wand, if you will, to activate the life force in statues. They would create these amazing lifelike. They seem like, if you've ever visited Sekhmet, like she's totally alive, and seems completely. And they do this ceremony once they're finished, and it's that symbolic way of saying she is alive. And they do this at the temple sites as well, opening of the mouth, the activating life force of these structures that embody the cycles of life. So here we are, where I was just speaking about this image of Anubis emerging, and again, we've shown this before, but emerging from the center of this Dendera zodiac, from the belly of Taret. And Taret is so powerful. She is this person that is present, this great grandmother, if you will, that is so integrally related to this first breath of life, and this basically the opening of the mouth for creation. And so he's riding the mer. And again, I wanted to remind everybody what the mer is. It's a plow. And it basically, mare is where we get our word Mary. Mary and Mary mean love, but it's a plow, and it's a tool for opening a path for irrigation ditches, right? Opening those path for water to flow, for agriculture, again, paths of fertility, and also for seeding, again, placing the seed for the, basically the next harvest or next cycle. And this is at Dendera, and it's the temple of Hathor. And what you look at next to the image of Anubis that I have in the center, he's the path opener. He's the alpha dog, if you will, because this is the beginning of the alphabet. That letter becomes
the letter A.
It becomes literally the letter A, and every tone from A, the alphabet spins into being, just like we see all of these netters coming out as forces of nature to create, again, our perception of reality as a spinning calendar that marks time and space. Wow. It's just amazing. So on the far left, you see the Alpha and Omega, and I'm showing it. The Omega is the hair of Hathor. She's responsible. She's the great mother that gives birth to, the physical perception of reality. And we see the A as the Alpha. It's the seed of Horus, right? Who takes the hero's journey. And he rides the current, which we're going to be talking about very soon. So, it's wild. And this all happens and begins in basically the age of Cancer. So, and then we start spinning into this amazing, game board, if you will.
And the age of Cancer is symbolized by the Kepler beetle, of course, Kepler being the beginning.
Exactly. And he's on his own little journey across the Milky Way. So yes, it's just so much powerful symbolism that all speaks to the same dynamics, energetic dynamics. And so, we've talked about the alpha and the apis and the mare, and it literally is the beginning of the language of light that breathes out from center. Written and oral language develops as a form of communication between separated aspects of self, as reflected by the story of the Tower of Babel, right? So, again, the ancient symbolism, it literally just embodies all this fabulous knowing. So each letter reflects a frequency or angle of light from the breath of source itself. And the ancients left us this brilliant map of the nature of reality as this eternal breath. Hakim, he used to call the hieroglyphics the language of the Suf. And as we know, the Suf is wisdom. And it reflects the frequencies of the Neteru, the forces of nature, each a vibrating aspect or archetype and tone of the one purified source. Just to give you, a way of thinking about how we all spin into being, we are all also aspects, of light, of this one divine source. So here we have this image. It comes from the Seti I tomb in the Valley of the Kings. Spectacular image on the ceiling. And people have been looking at it and trying to decipher it, and there's just so much to see here. But again, we're looking at the Taret on the far right, and she has the crocodile on her back, and the crocodile is Draco, right? Mm-hmm. And again, she's the conductor. If you see her here, she's holding the mooring posts, and she's conducting this big spin, right? And again, do you see what the bull is standing on? And doesn't that look like the same image that was coming out of Mehit's back?
Exactly, yes.
It's the spin. It's the spin of the heavens. Now I'm being more confident, right? And it's, again, I'm building into something that is even much more spectacular. And it's the spin in the heavens that it is so significantly important. And it's why the Egyptians were so focused on these circumpolar stars. And so that key is the key to opening the gateway between the form and formless realms. So, wow, that makes Mehit even more powerful, right? And as I've always said that, between her paws, and even the Akhet, it's representing this gate. It's an interdimensional gateway between these two realities that I believe we're bouncing back and forth through as we move like the fish up into our center, our source, the heart.
You mean we oscillate between form and formless?
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
And not just awake and asleep, but
exactly. It can't be any other way, and I'm going to I'll give you a hint now. We're going to start talking about the seasons of the great year of this, this moving through the ascending and evolving perceptions of reality, of conscious awareness itself. There are 4 seasons, and there are, we are in the lowest. We are the total physical. We think we are our bodies, and everything is physical and real. And even though we've been told by all the indigenous cultures that, it's only an illusion, right? But I believe there's actually, the season when we're descending, we're shape shifting. We're sort of, we're in the physical, but we remember our connectedness to all that is. We fall into form, but then there's a big reversal, right? When you say, Osiris, turn over and rise, right? There's a big reversal. And this is exactly how magnetic energy works, right? This creative electromagnetic energy. And there's this reversal, and then we rise, and we are in that, again, season where we still remember we're physical, but we're starting to feel our connectedness again. And then we walk through another gate, and we really feel that unity, that total connectedness. This to me is Atlantis. This is that time period when we felt our connection. We were aware. We communicated with the animals and the plants, our highest form of consciousness. And then, boom, there's another reversal, and we're falling back into form. And this is all reflected in, and we have a whole segment on this, a podcast, the cycles, the Egyptian cycles of consciousness, which is Keper, Ra, Un, Aten, and Amun. All speak to these dynamics. So, yeah.
And which one are we in again now?
Amun. Amun is, it's Amin. Min is the earth, right? And the letters that form the tones Amun represent the four elements. We are definitely rooted in a three-dimensional reality in this moment. And it also represents the hidden. And it's when our truths are basically hidden from us. We've lost that connection to source, and we forget who we are and how powerful we are.
So when you say amen at the end of a prayer, are you saying let
Well,
it be hidden, or
the way I like to look at it, yes, I don't say amen at the end of my prayers or what, to me, it does sort of say, I agree to keep it hidden, or I agree to having it hidden from me instead of looking deeper. But it can also mean that, it's a time, and all the faiths, many of the faiths today tell us to have faith, right? Have faith that the sun will rise again into another day cycle. And again, they represent these cycles as day and night cycles. And of course, there's four, there's the dawn, rising into noon and falling into night, sunset, we fall into the night. And this all represented by the whole story of Osiris and Set and Horus. Horus is the Hor rising, and again, related to the great year cycles I was just speaking about. So, yeah. Again, it's all related. And we have discussed a lot of this stuff in earlier podcasts. But here again, what's interesting is because we always want to have a name to something, is the bull the Big Dipper? Is the bull this? Is the bull Taret? Well, in ancient Egypt, the bull of heaven was this whole dynamic. If you look at it, everything's represented here. It's really representing, the bull is a symbol of us being in a physical reality. We're stubborn. We fall into form in the age of Taurus. And I think the bull for them, represented this, identification with our bodies, and the stubbornness. And Taurus, if you understand, astrology, Taurians are very physical. They like their physical pleasures. And so I think this all relates to, the zodiac and how we, even speak to everything today. But so if we consider that this bull of heaven is this whole dynamic, I want to point out too that, if you see at the bottom in the red circle, I'm showing this image of Horus, or a hawk-headed figure, and he is basically killing the beast.
mm-hmm.
And we've talked about this, and I'm going to talk about it again and again, but he's killing the beast, and the beast is the spin. The spin is life itself. And when he kills the beast, he stops the spin, we get our moment of silence. Ooh, I feel my connectedness to all that is. And then we breathe out again, right? In either direction. And I always say, which way do you want to spin? Because I think we do have a choice. This is all an illusion. Do we have to follow the pattern? Or if we make ourselves more aware, if we really do the work, do we enable ourselves to actually have a choice instead of just going through the motions? Can we make that reversal on our own? And I think we can in any given breath. And of course, I've said that before. And from Alan Ernest, he says, the bull represented the mediated power of the high gods on earth through the king, which I find interesting. And this was all in a paper about ancient Egyptian astronomy and Ursa Major. So yeah. And when I put this in the podcast, I'm talking about, their reference to the king being related to the pole stars, and I think even to the ecliptic star, even more important, is going back to that center, that source. And I think there might have been a loss of that knowing through time, and suddenly it becomes the mythology of the god wanting to go to the pole star and become one with the pole star. Well, why would you want to become one with the pole star? Because we're constantly moving. I would say I would want to become one with the center, the heart, which is the eye nebula, or the ecliptic pole, which I think is the true North Pole. But just saying. Sometimes knowledge is lost over time for many different reasons. Um, and here again, this is that same dynamic. This is on the ceiling of Dendera in the zodiac. It's right around the time of Capricorn. And you see, again, the hawk-headed figure, maybe Horus, killing the beast. And the beast is the spin. And you see, of course, Taret is holding that sort of like a chained rope, that it's cycling and spinning and turning, and he's stopping the spin of this bowl of heaven. And we showed you images earlier of from Edfu where they show even Taret, and in the killing of the beast scenes at Edfu, you see Horus, killing this hippopotamus, right? And that's Taret. And she's spinning. She's always in a different position. Also representing, I believe, this killing of the spin, the motion.
One thing to point out, it's not the same as the constellation Taurus. That's a different...
No. In this respect, it's really hard to say. Is she holding the big or little dipper? Very possibly. It has 7 stars around it. People want to say it's the Pleiades. And I think the Pleiades and the Big Dipper and the Little Dipper all have reflective energies and symbolism, and sometimes they interchange. But in this case, and we have the 7 Hathors. I even believe the 7 Hathors are related to the Big Dipper, just like in India. The 7 Rishis are the watchers, the seers, the knowers, which the 7 Hathors were.
The circumpolar stars.
Well, I think they're the circumpolar stars for sure, but also represented as the Big Dipper and the Little Dipper too, because it moves right around the circumpolar stars. But there's definitely a relationship between both, and maybe not so much the Pleiades. But another reference for all of this, and like I said, there's just so much. The story, there is a mythology about Horus and Set battling. And Horus grabs the leg of the bull, Taurus, right, and throws it across the heavens, and it ends up in this circumpolar mouth, basically, the mouth of the circumpolar stars. And he's imprisoned there, right, into a perception of the spin, the reality. We're spun into this material world. And this is the whole idea of Set being chaos, because, it's like spirit being trapped in body. I want out. And so that was his punishment from Horus, I think, for killing his father, cutting him into all those pieces and also throwing him in the coffin, so he does this, and Set is in this motion to try and escape again, which he does, of course, when we stop the spin. But here it's like you see Horus killing the beast again, and it's really the spin, the depth of the meaning of what it represents. So here again, we have our chariot and the stars. And what you see here is Dionysus is holding a rod in his hand, and it's creating this, again, 23.5 degree angle, which I think is interesting. But it's a chariot in the heaven starts moving on the game board when we fall into form, and the wheels keep spinning. And so I did show you when this happens. I'm not sure I have it ahead, but also when you see Osiris moving from Horus in the zodiac, he takes that first step when our perception of reality begins, and the angle that he creates with Horus is a 23.5 degree angle. But here I'm pointing out, again, it's all about the spin. I'm pointing out in the center, you see Anubis riding the mare out of her belly, which represents electromagnetism. And you see the plow, again, that's the mare, that's the Little Dipper. And then the Big Dipper here is expressed by the foreleg. And I'm pointing this out because people ask, is the foreleg of the bull the Big Dipper or the Little Dipper? Is the thigh? And the funny thing is they are interspersed in different myths. And different, when you see the illustrations, even on the temples, sometimes it represents the Big Dipper, so I've always struggled with how I present this to people. So I'm putting it out there. I've seen it both ways. But in this particular instance, the foreleg is the Big Dipper, and the plow or the wagon in Babylon is the Little Dipper. Spinning in opposite directions. Again, I'm introducing these concepts because we're going to talk about it in great length in the next few podcasts. And so in the center of the zodiac on that foreleg, and this is in the upper right-hand corner of the slide, you see there's a little animal and he's looking back. And most people do agree that it is a lion. And what's fascinating, if you look at the image underneath, it's an artist's conception or replication of the zodiac. He actually makes it a lion looking back towards center as if he's now going a different direction. And next to his head, you see an image that looks like a swastika. I'm going to show this bigger, but it really does look like it's representing a spin or a change of direction from center. And this on the far left is images of a wonderful little sculpture that I ran across that I saw when I was in the island of Iona in Scotland. And I was immediately drawn to it. And it reminded me literally of the one at Dendera. It may or may not be related, but I just really, as I said, was drawn to this imagery. And here I have it again. And this is spoken about. I wanted to introduce the book, Under the Sphinx, by this Manu. How would you pronounce his name, Alan?
Saifzadeh.
Thank you. He deserves his name to be spoken. He's done a lot of research. And anyway, if you want to look into this more, you can read the book. But this is another image of the key. And boy, I really do believe it's a key that turns. And there's so much more that can be spoken about that whole dynamic. And we might do that in the future. And again, here is Anubis, the embalmer. He's the embalmer. He's the mouth opener and the gatekeeper. All of these things, which is just fascinating. So, he's on the far left, you see Anubis, and he's basically riding currents, one having the red crown of Lower Egypt to the north and one having the white crown to the south. He's riding the dual currents, right? Which he's basically, as I said, he's spinning out on the mirror to create this dynamic. And so as the path opener, as the mouth opener, he's opening the mouth, I believe, of those circumpolar stars to create this perception of time and space as this magnetic field, right? As the embalmer, he's embalming us in it. That is the veil of Isis, right?
Such a funny way to look at it, because we always think of, embalming as something that happens after death.
Well, of course.
And in this case, it's the process that gives us what we consider life.
But we are backwards, right? Everything is upside down and backwards. We did a whole podcast on that toward the beginning. The way we perceive the world is upside down and backwards.
The shadows on Plato's cave.
Exactly. And even, they have these images of people walking upside down, sometimes without heads. And it basically says, beware of traveling the world upside down and backwards. So, as I've always said, the truth lies in the spaces in between what we perceive as form. And that's the reversal. When we have that reversal, we're suddenly going to start seeing things as they are. And right now, all those things are hidden from us by the veil of Isis, the electromagnetic field. Now, not only that surrounds us, but surrounds the Earth, surrounds our galaxy. This is, again, a fractal dynamic. It surrounds each one of our chakras, right? And so Anubis is the gatekeeper, as it basically symbolically, metaphorically stands. He's there at each one of the gateways, our chakras. And when we think we're ready to rise up, right, he's there to say, are you really ready? Take another look. He will open the door, right, the path opener, if we are ready to move on to the next stage.
If you know the right frequency to match.
Exactly. Exactly. Open sesame.
Wow.
um, so yeah, this whole breath of life, the breath of God on Earth is that this magnetic field, and it's breathing, right? It's always breathing in this electromagnetic dynamic. Um, the image in the center at the top is of Shu and Tefnut. And you can see their hands are just not touching. These are the charges, right? He is air, she is water. They are the atmosphere that is created when heaven and earth separate, right? To create our perception of the game board, which is electromagnetic. It's air and water creating this dynamic. And I've shown this before, but again, womb to tomb, tomb to womb. This is the image in the one of the crypts at Dendera that they call the light bulb. People want to call the light bulb, but it's really a lotus bulb, and it's symbolically showing the first breath of life as the sine wave serpent pattern inside the container, right? Inside this magnetic field, right? That holds us hostage in a perception that we are our bodies. And we begin to perceive, again, time and space as a sine wave current, and it spins. And here we are held hostage. I've shown this before, this wonderful image at Edfu that shows, basically, they call it the net, and you see the images of wildlife and bird life, and the hostages. There they are, the hostages being us. We're held hostage by a belief that we're in our bodies. This is what we're entombed in, right? The veil of Isis, the magnetic field. The net is the flexible matrix of creation, which today we describe as the matrix of space-time. And at the very end, you can't see it, but at the very front on the far right is an image of Thoth. He's always there because he is the master of the net, consciousness himself. The net, the magnetic field, and we've talked about this, is where consciousness presides. We think it's in our brain, but our brain isn't real. We're so wrapped up in physical, we think our bodies are everything, but we're an energetic dynamic made of liquid light. Right?
Well, our brain is the computer that decodes the information from the magnetic field.
Exactly. Well, it's the mind. It's yeah, it's the mind and interacting with spirit, and we're creating a perception of a reality that isn't real. It's actually mind-boggling. I watched an amazing YouTube video done by Manly P. Hall, and he speaks at great length about this, the integrity and interplay of universal and personal magnetic fields. And he is one that is so, he speaks so much about how the ancient Egyptians had full knowledge of magnetism and magnetic fields. And if you go back to the pre-dynastic times, and as we emerge from then, this is when we're more connected and we feel the currents. I've talked about this before. This is why they build their structures on specific places on the earth that have powerful currency, right? To harness that currency to create living structures that represents living bodies, basically, if you will. In this presentation, he speaks a lot about our how it's so significant for us to keep our magnetic fields in integrity, and how at this point in time in the age of Amun, if you will, we have lost that integrity and our magnetic fields are decaying, and this is why we have so much disease. And we've done the same thing to the Earth's magnetic field. And of course, all of this is connected to our galactic, magnetic field. Now, granted, this is all part of the cyclic dynamic, but if we want to turn it around, we have to go back to me, to center. If I can bring my magnetic field back and into integrity, to find balance, to find peace, to transmute my own polarity, then that's the beginning of everything in my mirror becoming more balanced. and back in peace. We all need a reversal. We need to get out of our heads and back into our hearts. So its centripetal force is any force that makes an object follow a circular path. And in fact, the meaning of the word centripetal is center seeking or towards center. And this is really important. I'm going to speak about this again in the future, because this is when we meditate and when we do our work, this is what we're doing. We're bringing our magnetic field back into its center through our inner work. The architectural blueprint of a physical perception of reality, we're looking at cycles within cycles within cycles, and it's fractal. I know I keep saying it, but you got to bring it home and have this vision of everything you're experiencing. This is why we say get out into nature, because when you experience the cycles of nature, you're experiencing the foundational patterns of reality. And nature's cycles untouched are basically in harmony. It's when, it's when we get involved and start disrupting things that everything falls out of that state of harmony into a state of dis-ease. And what's fascinating here, this is from The Secret History of the World by Mark Booth. He says that humans breathe on average 25,920 times per day, which is the number of years in a great year. Right? The great Plato's great year, the Platonic year. And it's basically, again, for example, the number of years it takes the sun to complete a full cycle of the zodiac. And this is what we've been talking about, the cycle of precession of the equinoxes. And it's amazing that, that these are patterns. And again, I'm going to be pointing out more. These patterns are fractal. It's the way it is. And you are a part of that. It's by design. It's the architectural design of our nature. It's Seshat, right? The great architect, it can't be any other way. The average ideal human lifespan is 72, also has the same number of days in it, which is interesting. And 72 degrees, we go back 72 degrees. The sun moves back 72 degrees on the zodiac every year. Every year, and that's how we precess back in, to a full great year. So here again, I've shown these images before. It's the Lion's Gate, basically bringing in the center of the Taurus field that spins us into motion. And it's showing you, when we see the symbolism of lions, you see the lions of the Akhet facing outward, and they're the creation, the masculine and the feminine are separating, which is the first breath. And then when they come back together, they come back to center. We either breathe out from center or we breathe in back to center to create these evolving and devolving cycles here. But it's a beautiful way, and again, of understanding symbolism. When we see the lions coming together, we see the lions separating. They're indicating these two different, dynamics. Separation consciousness, moving into separation consciousness or moving back into unity consciousness. Facing away from each other, the lions form the electromagnetic container, the matrix of the mind, Maya. When they come back together, they create the portal to the sun, the center, which, we've come to know as the lion's heart. Now, I've shown this before, probably won't be the last time. Everything is nothing, right? It's just the mouth of primordial waters of nothing, none, right? They called it none, N-U-N, with a twist. And when the twist happens, that's what the beginning of life. And it's the infinity symbol. And we're going to be talking about a lot about this in the future podcasts. But we're talking about, we've talked about the Ka and the Ba, the Ka being life force and the Ba being the soul. They are the things that separate, right? And come back together again to form the Ak, or divine light body. And this is, again, what they were doing, going through the resurrection rituals, is, in order to combine the Ka and the Ba to go back to that original light body. And we feel our connection to source. The lifeline or line of fertility, Ka, goes north, and the Ba, or spirit, goes south. as the line of spirituality. And this is when we're, this is relating to the ancient magnetic equator. And I've spoken about this beautiful line that emanates from the Sphinx through the pyramids and around the earth that connects all these powerful ancient sites. And this is that first breath of Ra, basically, of God on earth. And it's this powerful line, of unity consciousness. And then it separates. And the life force, the Ka, goes north as the feminine energy, and the Ba, or spirit, goes south as the masculine energy. The Ak, or light body, falls into the Ak-et, right, or horizon, beginning the journey of the Ak, or arc. Now, of course, the horizon is Horus, right, rising, right, beginning the journey of the Ak, or arc of the covenant, the coming together of the Ba and Ka. So that is the ultimate goal. So you see Raharakti, or Horus, of the two horizons here. And we'll talk about this later, but there is also theories that Raharakti itself represents the sun rising on the west. But the Ak, or spirit, is considered a union between the Ka and Ba, as we've just said, a manifestation of the transformation of the deceased into an eternal being made of light, associated with the stars in the Neteru. One of its most important features was its ability to communicate with the living. Which is, again, that ability to shapeshift and go between the worlds. And this is a wonderful image of this at the tomb of Nefertari in the Valley of the Queens. And you see her playing the game of Senet. There is our game board, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is in her tomb. So she's playing this game in order to allow for her Ba to be released from the container, which you see to the right of her playing the game. That's the Ba of Nefertari. And so what I find fascinating is underneath the game board, you see the two triangles that come together. They are 23.5 degree angles, right? So if you play the game right, your Ba can be released to join your Ka and become the light, the light body. And the Ba, of course, was known to be able to move between the worlds, shape-shifting. So I mentioned that Thoth was the master of the matrix, right? He was master of the net. And here's a beautiful image of him as the master of the net at Karnak. And you can see on either side of him, there's Khnum, who is master of the mysteries of water. He's the one we see creating life form, at the very beginning from the black earth. And to the right, you see an image of Sachet, the great architect again, responsible for the grid lines. So this message, is basically showing that, he is the master of the net. However, we can become masters of the net. And that's what these images represent. So with, the right dedication and study and, and work, we can become masters of the net. And so this was spoken about by Schwaller de Lubitz in the Temple of Man. And it's something that, again, I always bring forward the work of Dr. Ibrahim Karim and biogeometry. And he's providing us tools for becoming masters of the net today. So again, I encourage everyone to look up, even this book, Back to a Future for Mankind. He has two other wonderful books. He's working with healing and bringing our bodies and our homes back into balance in places for benefiting our bodies and bringing us again into that healthy basically electromagnetic fields that are in integrity, if you will. And this image, I also want to say that this knowing was presented by Dr. Robert Gilbert. And I did see a lot of things in a wonderful YouTube video that he was in. This actually is an excerpt from the Vesica Institute's personal wavelength online training. He was a student of Ibrahim Karim's, and he's carrying it forward today. So again, if someone else you might want to look up who is teaching this, it's so important. And he says initiates into the spiritual and vibrational sciences were known as the masters of the net. The net is the flexible matrix of creation. This was often shown in symbolic form as a physical net, as shown here in the hands of initiates. The masters of the net knew how to work with the invisible vibrational world, which forms a net, a matrix which determines the appearance and functions of everything in the manifest world. And what's funny is I find this long after I started doing the work and figuring what the net was. And, this is how it works. The more you delve into this, the more you look, the more you study, the more you see the patterns, the more you find that you didn't discover anything. It's already known. It's out there. And it's just a very exciting journey. For those that choose to take it. This, I think, is a wonderful, wonderful image. And it was shared by someone. They didn't say, I couldn't find out where the image came from, but it's of the tarot card, the Hanged Man. And it shows, us falling into the maze of the illusion of form, which I just find fascinating, upside down, right? So esoterically, this is from Manly P. Hall. Esoterically, the Hanged Man is the human spirit which is suspended from the heaven by a single thread. Wisdom, not death, is the reward for this voluntary sacrifice. We all chose this, during which the human soul, suspended above the world of illusion and meditating upon its unreality, is rewarded by the achievement of self-realization. It's up to us. It's up to us to make the journey, and there you see the serpent, and I just love the imagery because it's just so beautiful. We all chose to enter the labyrinth. So the path of the horror, or Shu, the life force, is basically that which comes from center. And here we see this periodic spiraling of the elements. And this is based on the work of Walter Russell. And we see H, hydrogen, is at the center. And then, based on different, different levels of the magnetic force, we see them spiraling out in the Fibonacci sequence. This is our basically our spiraling of the building blocks for our perception of reality. It's always the same patterns. So H is the portal between heaven and earth, that which separates heaven and earth, the double square birthing blocks. Hathor, both H's, and Horus as the hero. This is the journey begins when heaven and earth separate. Other words with H, and again, I just want to point out even the tones and the letters all have symbolic meanings.
Well, H is also the breath out. It's the beginning breath.
Exactly. Exactly. Thank you. And then we have, Hor being Horus, but our words harmony, horizon, of course. Then we have home, we have harvest, we have heart, all related to this, Horus is the hero. Right? Hero.
Well, and in ancient Egyptian, Her, H-E-R, means the face. I mean, there's a lot of other meanings as well.
Exactly. Hor is the seed. Het is the place. So, really fascinating. So that wraps it up for today. And I have 2 new tours to talk about very shortly, briefly, but I'll be doing a wonderful tour with Jocelyn Starfeather and in January into February, and it's going to be really spectacular. And we're going to Esna this time to see the spectacular ceiling. It's just been cleaned and the colors have been brought out. And again, all of these images, the things that I've been sharing in the podcast, we're going to be able to see, and I'll be able to get more pictures. But it's going to be exciting. It's always been one of my favorite temples. And then afterwards, Jocelyn's going to lead a retreat to the White Desert, which was a huge hit when we did it in March. Great trip if you're interested in coming to Egypt. And then after that, in the end of February into March, I'm going to be working with Susan Moore and Brian Forrester again High Technologies and Metaphysics tour, where we'll look to both the esoteric and metaphysical, as well as the ancient technologies and megalithic structures, and that level of consciousness that enabled them to envision and create these structures that harness these powerful energies. So if you're interested in coming to Egypt, you can check out the Horus Rising site, and everything's posted there. So thank you.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Please like, share, and subscribe. We'll see you soon. Thanks, Patricia.
Thank you, Alan.